For our healthcare executives out there that are listeners, it would be so great to meet you in person. And that opportunity is coming up in June at our 13th annual Healthcare Executive Forum. It is being held in Madison, Wisconsin. It is the afternoon of June 18th and the morning of June 19th. This year, the topic is how to make high reliability, psychological safety, and just culture simple. And not just make it simple, make it happen. Because what we're known for at Capstone Leadership Solutions is taking big, complex ideas and helping them become practical, doable, and actionable ideas that get positive impact. You can sign up using the link below in the show notes, or you can email us at info@capstoneleadership.net. It would be great to see you there.
So the strategic priorities of the organization are really the plans for the organization to get better and better or get closer to being that utopia of healthcare. So it makes sense that we would say, okay, what behaviors align with getting us to that new, better place? And what behaviors will it take? And, how are we going to get to our mission and our vision? How are we going to behave our way there? And so aligning it to mission, vision, values, and strategic priorities makes sense.
Welcome to Culture Change RX, the podcast for healthcare professionals that are committed to creating a thriving workplace culture, improving the experiences of employees and patients, and ultimately unlocking their organization's next level of potential. I'm Sue Tetzloff, your host and co-founder of Capstone Leadership Solutions. Join me and my insightful guests each week as we share actionable insights for navigating the crucial people side of the business of healthcare. Subscribe now for a weekly dose of Culture Change RX. Now let's dive into this week's conversation where culture change takes center stage.
It's Sue here from Capstone Leadership Solutions, and I'm glad to be with you again in another episode. This is, again, one of those solo episodes that we call Culture Bites, and the focus of today's episode is going to be on behaviors in the workplace. And recently, I was asked to participate on a panel in which the discussion or the topic was managing for morale. And this was through the Great Lakes chapter of the American College of Healthcare Executives, of which I've been a member for a very, very long time, board certified in healthcare administration through the American College and a fellow. And so I love that in the last couple years, I've gotten involved in their local chapter, the Great Lakes American College of Healthcare Executives local chapter, and in particular in helping their efforts for ongoing leadership development of its members. So lots of fun and purposeful work to collaborate with the various leaders from across the region on that very thing. Anyway, I thought, why not take what I talked about there and bring it to you all in an episode of the podcast? So here we go. We're going to talk about behaviors in the workplace. So I want to start with talking about this activity that I have facilitated, I don't even know how many times, dozens of times in various healthcare organizations over the years. And I've done this activity with various groups within healthcare organizations, like maybe it's a group of just physicians and other providers. Maybe it's a group of just leaders. Maybe it's a group of just employees. Maybe it's a diverse mixed group of all sorts of folks from the organization. So I've done this with many different groups within an organization, and I might repeat the activity multiple times in the same organization. And then, of course, I've repeated it across many, many organizations. So I've done this lots of times within an organization and across many organizations. And interestingly, the result comes out the same every single time. So we don't really do this activity too much anymore. But talking about this activity and the results that we saw with this activity helps make a point and helps tee up the topic of behaviors in the workplace. So this activity really had two parts. One, we would ask the group that had assembled to have really playful fun around describing a healthcare organization that is the utopia of healthcare, meaning that they are the very best place to work. Every patient would want to receive their care there. They wouldn't want to go anywhere else. They were getting measurable results that were the very best and always improving. They could feel that it was the best, like it had this feel to it that were, could be described as the very best. So they had a lot of playful fun, really describing objectively and subjectively the utopia of healthcare. It often included things like how are they doing financially, how much were they growing and their market share and their service excellence and their quality and outcomes excellence, their culture and their people and the results related to their human resources and culture. And so one of the things that they would always talk about was great morale and great culture and stuff like that. That would be one of the things that they would talk about related to describing maybe the people pillar, the people aspects of an organization that was the utopia of healthcare. Finance, they'd be making lots of money and be able to invest in improvements in their people and those kind of things. So you get the picture, or you could even do this yourself. You could paint your own picture of the utopia of healthcare and have fun with that. So then the next part of the activity was we would ask them what it would take to get there. Like we'd say, are you there yet? Of course, they'd all say no. But if you wanted to be and you wanted to create this action plan that would get you there or closer to there, what would that action plan look like? What changes would have to take place? What improvements would have to take place? What would your organization need to do to actually take steps to moving into being the very best or the utopia of healthcare? And interestingly, they would go right to work and they would talk about all the things that would need to be improved, all the things that they would need to change or make better to become the utopia of healthcare. And interestingly, this is what happened over and over and over again that was pretty predictable over time, is that with all of the groups, no matter what organization we were in, no matter what group we were with, whether it was providers or leaders or employees or a mix of the groups, the thing that came out that was the same every time was that 80 to 90% of the things that they said were the actions that need to take, the changes that need to be made, the improvements that need to be had, that would take their organization from where they are now to being in the utopia of healthcare was behaviors. And so that has helped us coin a phrase that we use a lot where we say, when we're transforming an organization, behaviors matter most when we're working with them to do that. And so the interesting part or the challenging part about that, though, is that behavior change is the hardest of all, whether it's individually with yourself, me, I teach this stuff, I research and I coach and I help many individuals and groups with change. And behavior change is the hardest of all individually and also collectively in entire organizations. When you're thinking about hundreds or thousands of people, behavior change is the hardest of all. When it comes to behaviors, what we accept is what we teach, what we permit, we promote, and what we allow will continue. And so that actually reminds me, when I say those phrases, that reminds me of Michael Cohen and his book, What You Accept is What You Teach. And actually, Jane McLeod and I co-authored a book, The Employee Experience, A Capstone Guide to Peak Performance, where we have a whole chapter about behaviors and behavior standards and bringing and keeping high standards for behavior alive in a workplace. And Michael Cohen actually wrote the foreword to that book, to our book. And so we talk about, in particular, this concept of raising your standards and lowering your tolerance for certain behaviors. So how do we do that, right? And so if we want to get to that utopia of healthcare, to an organization with amazing morale and a great culture and all the other things that would be great about a great healthcare organization, and this idea that behaviors is the pathway to getting there, is that we need to do two things. One, we need to establish standards of behavior, and two, we need to bring and keep those standards alive. So those are the two key components to really defining and then really living that definition of great behaviors in our workplace. We say, this is how we behave around here, is what you're trying to create, where everyone will just know in their heart of hearts that we have an established way about how we behave around here. And we all embrace that, right? And we all support that. I love that Gallup says that the definition of culture is really, this is how we do things around here. And so this is how we behave around here is really about culture change as well. And so That first part that I mentioned is establishing behavior standards or standards of behaviors, and they might be called something else in organizations. Like, for instance, a hospital we worked with, Vernon Memorial, they called them the Vernon Virtues. And so it was their established standards of behavior. Another organization, Eaton Rapids Medical Center, theirs was called the Be Positive Standards, and they had a story that went along about why they called them that. And they teach that story when they train new employees on their Be Positive standards. And so it's the first step in starting the process of elevating behaviors in individuals, in teams, and entire organizations or entire systems, is clearly defining what it means as far as great behaviors. And so that is the first step. And so we recommend that when an organization is setting or resetting their standards of behavior, that there is one set for the entire organization. So it's not like the surgery department has their own set and the lab department has their own set and revenue cycle has their own set. That there is one organization-wide or system-wide set of behavior standards that they all will strive to live towards. One set of standards for the entire organization. It is a uniter, right? It's a thing that can bring us together as an organization and break down silos if there is this one set of standards that are all of ours, that we all strive for. So when establishing the behavior standards, they are organization-wide. And also we recommend that they are employee created. We call this do it with them, not to them. So this idea of, really the employees make up the majority of the staff in most any organization. As leaders, we're outnumbered by far. And also it's just this idea of, do leaders want to be the ones to define the behaviors? Or would it be best and there'd be more ownership and more buy-in in not only the standards themselves, but the process of bringing and keeping them alive if they are employee created? And so that is our recommendation. And we've helped dozens of organizations and employee teams be able to be the ones to create or revise the organization's set of behavior standards. And then also a recommendation about establishing behavior standards is that they're written in the positive. So they're not written in the way of what not to do. So don't be rude. That would be one thing that we'd say don't do. So they're not written like that. They're written into the positive. So what are the positive behaviors we want to see in our workplace that get us to utopia and a better work culture? And so we write these behavior standards in the positive, how we want them to behave and what we want them to do. And then also a fourth tip related to establishing behaviors is that they are aligned with the organization's mission, vision, values, and strategic priorities, right? So the strategic priorities of the organization are really the plans for the organization to get better and better or get closer to being that utopia of healthcare. So it makes sense that we would say, okay, what behaviors align with getting us to that new, better place? And what behaviors will it take? And, how are we going to get to our mission and our vision? How are we going to behave our way there? And so aligning it to mission, vision, values, and strategic priorities makes sense. A lot of organizations align them very specifically with the values because, again, the values are often created in a way in which it aligns with mission, vision, and strategic priorities. And it kind of aligns with just this whole concept of behaviors and values. And so there might be a subset of behavior standards under each value in particular. Now, establishing behavior standards is something that maybe happens in an organization, once and then is updated maybe every 7 to 10 years as major strategic priorities or values change in the organization. I'll give an example of this in my own hospital where I worked. As at a community hospital, set our standards of behaviors, an employee team helped do that. And then about 8-9 years later, our organization with a new strategic plan had this new strategic priority to become a high reliable organization. Well, when we first started and set our behavior standards, to be quite frank, our organization was very underperforming. So high reliability wasn't even really in our sights. We just, wanted to get to average or above average, let alone to high reliability or zero defect. So once we got to this point where we're already now a very, very good organization, and now we have our sights on high reliability, we needed to ask ourselves, what behaviors will help us get there? What are the behaviors of a high reliable organization? And how do we then update our behavior standards to, again, align some behavior standards with that new strategic priority? And so we don't make the behavior standards a moving target. This is something that is kind of set in place, just like your mission and vision and values, and doesn't change very often. And so that's some nuggets about establishing behavior standards. So the next thing I really want to do is talk about 5 key tips or aspects of bringing and keeping those standards alive once you have them. So the first tip we would give an organization is to actually have a commitment event. So you want to introduce your employees to these standards of behaviors. And usually the employee team that created them is the one that introduces them and educates all employees on those standards. And then there's some sort of show of commitment, and it's very symbolic. It's a way of having this almost ceremony and commitment around this concept that it's a new day, that we're drawing a line in the sand, that we used to behave this old way, and now we're all in it together to strive towards these new high standards for how we behave around here. Now, at this commitment event or the ceremony that happens to introduce the standards and commit to them, there really is no pixie dust that's sprinkled across, each employee and everyone, where all of a sudden they're magically going to behave differently. But what happens here is that mark on your calendars that we know as an organization that on this day or during this week or during this month, we as an organization are embarking on a new day in the history of our organization where we're in it together. And we'll each try and help each other to live these standards. And that almost like in the history or timeline of an organization, you can mark it on the calendar or the timeline in history that we introduced and committed to this new way of behaving in our organization. And that really does have a positive effect on helping with behavior change, which is the hardest of all. And the second tip is, or tactic that can be used to bring and keep standards alive, is having a feedback culture. So really empowering and equipping everyone in the organization, not just leaders, to provide feedback. In our organization, the model that we teach in healthcare organizations that we work with is a feedback model of both informal and formal feedback. And the informal feedback is compliments and call outs. So when behaviors are in standard or improving, we compliment. If they're outside standards, we call them out. And that really this is omnidirectional. It's not just leaders to employees, but everyone in the organization, even a dietary aide to a physician, can call somebody out on their behavior. And, this is really huge in an organization, is to get to a point where everyone feels safe to give feedback. In fact, it's rebranded as an act of caring, and it's actually kind to give feedback, even call outs. It means I care about you. I care about our high standards. I care about our team. I care about our culture. I care about our organization. I care about our patients. And because I do, I will give compliments and call outs. And we equip and we inspire our employees to do that. One phrase we teach or help them brand in their organization is I noticed equals I care. And what I mean by that is when we start a compliment or we start a call out, we can talk about the behavior that we noticed that either is compliment worthy or call out worthy. And we start with that. I noticed how you were just talking to that patient on the phone, and either compliment that or call it out. And so having a feedback culture and continuously working to empower and equip your employees and leaders to give feedback is a very powerful tactic to bring and keep high standards alive. Another one is top of mind tactics. So visual, verbal, virtual, some form of almost like a campaign or a reminder of keeping our behavior standards top of mind. They can't have this commitment event and then 3 years later, 3 years have passed and nobody's even talked about these standards again and they've never seen them again. And with organizations that we work with, they do have employee driven teams and employee experience team where they own that year after year to have a standard of the month campaign. And they pick behaviors in the organization where there's opportunities to improve, or it's really important for the strategies of the organization. And they keep those standards top of mind and help employees be reminded of them and give them tips and tricks for living those standards. And then also department leaders, they might have department specific challenges that are unique to them about specific behaviors. And they may want to do that as well, is have a campaign a month for a specific standard. I'll give an example. When I was visiting a hospital last year, it was actually the birthday of our company, and they were our first partner hospital that we worked with. So we went to celebrate our birthday with them, and they were opening a new building, and I was touring that new building. And I walked through the revenue cycle, billing department, patient billing, and up on a big, huge whiteboard. And I mean, huge letters on this big whiteboard, it said fun. And that's one of their behavior standards, is fun. And then they had some specific behavior standards. And that was their standard of the month that they were focusing on. And every day when they huddle in front of that board, they talk about the fun they had at work yesterday, and they do that day after day to keep that standard alive. A fourth tip that we can do to bring and keep standards alive is teach people how to reach for these high standards. So we have to teach them and remind them about the standards, but then we have to teach them things like feedback or other things that help them really change their own behavior and or help others to change their behavior and be supportive of their behavior change. So there's some education and training and awareness and things that we can do as an organization. And again, we put a lot of that into the hands of an employee-driven team. So you can't just teach them the standards. You have to teach them things that help them change behavior. So we have to do that as well. And the fifth and final tip that I wanted to bring today is about hiring and onboarding, and how this can be part of bringing and keeping standards alive. Is we can really hire for behavior and train to skill. And so tactics like behavior-based interviewing is a great one, and really looking at making behavior part of our selection criteria. It's not just the experience, education, training, and credentials that we're looking for in healthcare when we're hiring a new employee or provider, but it's also their behavior. And we're not just looking for culture or behavior fit, we're looking for culture or behavior add. So for instance, if fun is one of your values in your organization, and you realize that in our billing department, we don't have a lot of fun people, well, with our next hire, we might want to look for that actually in our hiring criteria. It might seem not to be the most important, but if you really want to live your behaviors in your department, then you might want to hire for those behaviors as well. So there are other tactics than the ones I just mentioned here to bring and keep high standards alive, but I think those 5 are great ones to talk about. So I hope you got a nugget there that you can just start with to help your organization or your team or your department to elevate its behaviors, because behaviors matter most. Thanks for listening, and tune in next Wednesday when we're back with another episode. Bye now.
Thanks for tuning in to Culture Change RX. If you found value in today's episode and you are a believer in fostering change in healthcare, join us in making a difference. Follow, rate, and review our podcast on your favorite platform. Share it with colleagues and your network. Together, we can make a lasting impact. Until next week, keep inspiring positive change.
We know that healthcare executives have their sights on high reliability, just culture, and psychological safety. In true capstone fashion, we're all about helping simplify the complex and helping entire healthcare organizations execute successfully on big, bold initiatives such as these. One such way that we can help is through our upcoming Healthcare Executive Forum. In its 13th year, this forum has been helping healthcare executives learn proven approaches for executing successfully on big, bold initiatives. So whether you're just starting your journey to high reliability or well on your way, this event has something for everyone. Our time-honored commitment is that every attendee leave with an actionable and impactful plan that they can just start when they get back to the office the next day. The event is on June 18th and 19th. In Madison, Wisconsin, and you can go to capstoneleadership.net, and under the resources page, look for the details on our upcoming events. Plan now for you and your executive team to attend.